Hey everyone, Jeff May here from Jeff May Art, as well as a Sculpted Life here on YouTube. I want to welcome you to an episode of International Wood Carvers Association. We're going to be talking about lots of fun stuff today, so thanks for joining us.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the International Association of Woodcarvers. Today is Saturday, the 24th of June, 2023, a little bit after 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I appreciate you all coming in and joining us today. Apologize for the video connection on my side. Apparently, I'm having some technical difficulties with the iPad since the last time I was on Zoom, so right now I'm just using my laptop, so hopefully the video quality is okay. We'll try to stumble through this and do the best we can. Want to welcome you all to the summer series. This is the first meeting of the summer that we've had. Usually in June, July, and August, we back off and just have one meeting a month. We know that people are out on vacation and doing things outside and aren't able to make the meetings like they usually are in the fall and the spring. So we've decided just to drop back to one meeting a month. This is our June meeting, which we'll have Jeff May on here in just a few minutes. Jeff's going to be talking to us a little bit about his carving journey. Jeff's been on with us a few times. He's got some great insights as far as his creativity and what he has coming up as far as his YouTube channel goes. So we look forward to hearing from Jeff. Some of the other things we have coming up, we've got Randall Stoner, who is the Mad Carver. He's going to be on with us on July the 15th. That'll be our next meeting of the summer series. And then Rich Smithson of Helvey is going to be on August the 26th. Rich is going to come on and he's going to make 3 knives live for us while we're in the meeting. And we're going to auction those 3 knives off during the meeting. And so whoever wins that auction will also get the 3 knives that he's building there live. So it'll be pretty cool to see him make those and then actually win those. Today, we're going to do an auction in the chat like we usually do. Rich and Holly have been gracious enough to donate some knives to us to help us with the Zoom subscription. We still have to pay for that every month, whether we have 1 meeting, 4 meetings, whatever it may be. And we also have a yearly subscription that we have to pay. And they donate the knives so that we can do these auctions, so that we have the funds available to be able to continue to have these meetings. So we want to thank them for their donations. And today we're going to auction off a autographed Gary Phelan Helvey Signature 1 Series knife. And I've got it right here. I don't know if you can see that. The blade's about a 2 1/8 inch. You can see there the autograph Gary Phelan on one side. Rich has burnt his logo and Gary's name, CCA, on the other side. It says Signature Series on the bottom, and it's numbered number 29 on the bottom. So we're auctioning off this knife along with a brand new International Association of Woodcarvers hat. This is a low profile 115 Richardson hat. I just got this in. This is going to be the new hats that we have for this fall, and hopefully I'll be able to make some of those available so people can pick those up if you're interested. But the auction is for the 2 things combined. It's for the knife and the hat. Highest bidder will win. Put your bid in the chat, and I'll call the auction at the end of the meeting, and whoever the highest bidder is will win the knife and the hat. We ask for payment to be made by PayPal, so if you do win that, you need to stay online with us when the meeting is over so that we can collect the information from you then. Want to remind you all of some of the things that are coming up. The CCA Carving the Rockies 2nd annual show is going to be happening September 23rd and 24th out in Colorado Springs. If you haven't made arrangements to be there, make sure you go ahead and make reservations. Go out on the CCA website, see what they have available. They're going to have a dinner there. They're going to be having some special competitions. There's also going to be some classes that you can participate in. But you need to get signed up for those because I know those go quick. So if you're interested in that, go out to the CCA website. You can just Google CCA and you'll be able to find it out there, and check out the Carving the Rockies show coming up in Colorado Springs. We do have some workshops that you all can participate in this summer that's coming up. Janet Cordell is going to be doing a class on carving the American cowboy. That's on August the 7th. That's when it starts. I think it runs for 2 or 3 weeks on the weekend. So contact Janet Cordell if you're interested in that. Bob Hershey is going to be doing a class starting on August the 19th, carving Fabulous Phoebe. That's a frog that looks like he's been swimming. Again, if you want to check that out, go out to Wood Carving Academy and check out the workshops there, and you can see the information. But you'll have to contact Bob Hershey if you're interested in signing up for that class so that he can get you signed up. And then Dave Stetson's going to be starting a class September the 2nd. So his class will be right before the CCA Carving the Rockies show. He's going to be doing a class on wood carving an angel. Again, if you're interested in that, Dave's on our meeting today. Reach out today, get signed up for that. Should be an amazing project. And again, you can go out and see these projects on Wood Carving Academy's website. It's woodcarvingacademy.com. You can also go out and subscribe there if you're interested. They have subscriptions for 1 month, 3 month, or a year. And you can go back and watch some of the classes and take classes at your own pace out there on Wood Carving Academy. It's a great deal. It has a lot of good classes where you can learn at your own pace. So make sure you go out and check out Wood Carving Academy. Having said all of that, I want to welcome Jeff May on with us again today. Jeff's been on with us a few times. He is a chainsaw carver. He carves a lot of bears. He also has started doing some sculpting. He's going to talk a little bit about that. And he's also taken on a little bit of an adventure that he's going to talk about as far as taking this boat out on the lake and doing some carving out there. So we look forward to hearing about that. So Jeff, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you. I appreciate you coming on today, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Hey, Blake, thanks so much for having me. You guys, super big blessing, honestly. I've been thinking a lot lately about, when people want to get started in anything, whether it be painting, sculpting, carving, whatnot, there is a certain barrier to entry. And I really feel like you guys have lowered that barrier to entry to a point to make it accessible for so many people. And that's really one of the coolest things I can imagine. So whether you're, financially you're strapped and, you could just get into it. Chainsaw carving is a little bit different. There is actually a fairly large barrier to entry. If you really take it down to the tools that you need in terms of safety equipment and a variety of chainsaws, at least, 2 in order to kind of, just like you guys have a variety of knives, we've got a variety of chainsaws and chainsaw blades that accomplish different things. So I really think it's cool that you guys are doing what you're doing. Thank you for inviting me. Kind of a little bit of the oddball in the mix in the sense that most of you guys who are watching this channel probably are hand carvers. And so, but I think I'm going to bring this full circle because there's a story behind all of this that I really feel like is sort of, it's kind of conducive to basically anybody who's doing carving and or sculpting. So anyway, I guess I would start off by saying, I just turned 50. And so one of the things that has been crossing my mind lately in turning 50 is both a new physicality to me and my body, and an awareness of what is going on, what has been going on for a number of years, and how chainsaw carving has affected my body. But there's also another element that I really am trying to really focus closer in on, and that is just the meaning behind my art. For a long time, I would use picture references for a lot of the work that I do, studying anatomy and different things like that. But those images are kind of static. And so I've really, for a long time, wanted to be able to put myself in a position where I could watch the animals that I'm sculpting, and in order to better represent them. When you are quiet and still and you're in nature, there's something about that is really powerful. But also watching an animal interact with its own environment, seeing how it moves, seeing how the environment affects it, like the wind, the different things, like when a bear's fur is wet, what it looks like, how it moves. And those kinds of things are things that I want to improve on and zone in on. And so that has led me to asking that question is how can I spend more time in nature and observing them and making them a part of my artwork and who I am as an artist, which has also brought this whole thing full circle in why I decided to purchase a boat, and in this particular case, a sailboat, and in hopes that I can travel around to different places, observe these animals in their natural environment, and then telling that story through YouTube. So there's lots of new stuff in my life. And I feel like I kind of jumped in. I jumped into the deep water, let's put it that way, because there are so many things that I've had to learn and to teach myself. And I feel like as I get older, it just takes just a little bit longer to learn things and to grasp them, maybe more so on the technology side. And I get pretty frustrated, to be honest, because I'm not I love technology and what it can do, but sometimes I get really tangled up, the little nuts and bolts of how to bring it to fruition. So I don't know if you guys have any questions, or Blake or Dave, go ahead and shout those out so that I can kind of answer those. But I guess I'll start off by saying a little bit of my background. I grew up in Southern California, and I was not an artist whatsoever, and decided that I was a boat captain for a long time, and I was in Alaska and felt like God had kind of called me away from the ocean, which just seemed like the craziest idea ever. And it took me 3 years to do that. But ultimately, that led me to leaving, moving to Idaho. And that's actually where I picked up the chainsaw for the very first time. This was around 1999. And my early work was really, really rough. It just didn't have a lot of substance to it. But every time I stepped up to carve, I would really try to do better and better in each piece. And I could see the improvement from one to the other. And along with the encouragement of other friends and family, that really led me down this path of continuing to carve. For probably 18 months, it was, an occasional carve and on the more of the hobby side. And then it led to me doing it full time. And so as a full-time artist, you really start looking at your artwork differently, because now it's your bread and butter. It's the means in which you use to provide for yourself. I was single at the time, and then eventually a family. But I really didn't see it at that time as being something that could provide for me. But I just dedicated my life and my time to learning the craft and working hard to try to get better and better. All that to say, as I get older, I really feel this pull, this tug to kind of come back to some of those more watery elements, like the ocean and stuff. And so I purchased this North Sea 27, which is a sailboat, 27-footer. And while I get acquainted with the boat and set it up for more further abroad type of stuff that are ocean related, I've got it moored on Lake Ponderay. That's in the northern part of Idaho, on this beautiful lake that's it's massive, and it has a lot of shoreline that's very remote. And so I got this idea to try to attempt to carve from the boat. And it's both carving and sculpting. And so the difference is being that when I'm sculpting, I'm using clay with the intent of making a bronze sculpture versus wood, obviously being a wood sculpture. And so last year I took the boat, her name is Raven. I took it out on Lake Ponderay for 2 weeks, and I towed a cedar log behind the boat and found a shoreline that I could work on. And I basically did a little remote shore carving. And my whole goal in that whole process was really to sort of identify what the challenges would be. And I think the largest challenge in that scenario was my ability to feel like the boat was safe. Lake Ponderay is an extremely deep lake, and there's not very many good anchorages. And so I was constantly worried about the boat. One of the places that I anchored was on one of the few areas that actually has some flat ground near the shore. And that happens to have a drop off that goes from like 60 feet to a few hundred feet in a relatively short distance. So anyway, I set up this sort of camp, if you will, on the shoreline and did some carving. And I was setting out to do some carving in its entirety, start to finish. And I ended up not being able to do that because I took like a battery powered one of those solar generators, but it was a fairly small one and it would not power my power tools. So I was limited to what I could do with the chainsaw. So I decided to just take the time to block out a bunch of sculptures, and then I would take them back to the studio to be completed. So I had to justify to my wife and to myself, you know, my time out there and enjoying my time on the water, which was one of the goals, but also to get some work done and accomplished. So in the end, I don't think it's the most efficient way to make art. But as I started this new YouTube channel, A Sculpted Life, I think it does provide a certain degree of value in terms of telling the story. Because, you know, I think whether you're an artist, a studio-based artist, or one that goes out and collects your own, you know, reference images and stuff, I think the desire is still there to really observe these animals in their natural environment. And to be honest, it's not like I get to observe bears here on Lake Ponderay. Even though there are bears around there, it's difficult to arrange the timing of everything versus like, you know, inland waters of British Columbia, where there's a predictable pattern with the bears, with the migration of salmon and that sort of thing. And there, it's an easier thing to basically, you know, not necessarily guarantee, but with a high rate of assurance that you're going to be able to go to a particular area and study these animals and what they're doing. So that's the ultimate goal, is to be able to do things like that. For now, like I said, I'm just on Lake Ponderay, getting to know the boat, setting it up for ocean going passages, and figuring out all this stuff that goes around YouTube, which is, it's a lot. I mean, it really is. And way more than I thought. You know, you've got camera gear, you've got software, you've got all the intricacies of YouTube and how the algorithm works in order to put your videos out into in front of people. And it's a lot. I do most of everything that I do by myself. And I've set out to try and put out a video every couple weeks. And I'm behind right now. I had a couple projects that and this happens a lot, where you go and you film the project, but it doesn't have everything. Like, for instance, I did this carved mantle scene for a family on Lake Coeur d'Alene, and I did all the filming of the process and going to, but I was really missing the kind of the substance, which was the actual owners and their interaction of the piece, as well as the house not being completed. Like when I was doing the sculpting, it was under construction. And so there's lots of little things that I would like to go back and film, which I have been invited back to do, but just haven't been able to make it back there. So there's these huge little breaks and gaps between my ability to really tell the story from start to finish. And it's difficult for me as a new person in the filming element to really tell that story in a compelling way that people find really interesting. So that has a lot of room for me to grow, because it's really an entirely new art form in itself. So I don't know if there's any questions that you guys are wondering about. Certainly shout them out. I don't want to just be like a completely talking head here. Hey,
Jeff, Jeff, do you have any carvings close by that you can show people some of the stuff that you've worked on?
I was touching up some climbing bears. I hate to just show you guys all bears. Can we just walk a little bit? It'll be a little rough, but
no, that's fine. Go right ahead.
Let me take you off my tripod here and I'll try and walk you on. This is actually, can you see these? using my selfie camera. These are two cedar poles, and these are actually the back surface, and I'm trying to keep it wet. I'm going to experiment with using Pentrasil, which maybe you guys are familiar with, to see if I can prevent these cedar logs from checking and cracking. But the ultimate end result of these guys is going to be carved totem poles. So these are going to be twin poles carved identically, and they're going to be part of a gate entry. So that'll be kind of fun. There's a little black bear carving. These climbers, I actually do quite a bit of these guys. They're designed to just fit right on a pole or a post or a tree. And let's see, we can go inside here. Here's an eagle bust. Sorry, I'm trying to keep my hands out of it. We've got some, this is actually a new piece that I did, kind of an abstract piece. I don't know if you see the whole thing or not, but anyway, it's a wall-mounted piece. And then there's steel elements up here at the top, these little steel balls, and then at the very bottom, this is all steel. So I'd like to do a little bit more of those kinds of pieces. And there's another abstract piece. This one's quite tall. Sorry, I'm trying to get you in the frame. This will have a dome, a steel dome top to it. Yeah, anyway, I've got a handful of pieces around that are getting ready. I'm doing a show here. This is our first show of the year. This is Art on the Green coming up the first weekend in August. And so pretty excited about that. And then right after that, we have a studio tour where we invite people out directly to the studio where they can see my working space and see sculptures that are available and that sort of thing. So that's been kind of exciting too.
Hey, Jeff, another thing that we talked about the other day when we were preparing for the meeting was how you were going to do some castings of the stuff that you did while you were out on the boat. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of your clay stuff and then what your plans are as far as the casting and why you're wanting to do that?
Right. So, you know, with this whole idea I mentioned earlier with turning 50 and my arms started hurting, that has been one of the driving forces behind me, really just sort of like while I'm still physically able-bodied, but noticing that the carving is having a pretty significant effect on my body, that I would be trying to work in a new medium that would be easier for me to transition into, and maybe not like fully transition, maybe just 50% of my workflow. That would really alleviate a lot of pressure off of my arms and the production that's associated with that. But the goal is for me to tell the story of me making my art, whether it be wood or bronze, through the boat, whether that be on Lake Ponderay or anywhere else, and then back at the studio. So kind of in and out of the studio, my life as an artist, and in making the sculptures out of clay, it's real. I've used clay for a long time, and I use it for modeling, for just trying to discover the movement of my piece. And I would recommend that to anyone who's a sculptor, no matter what medium you're in. It's really cool to take oil-based clay, which is clay that does not get hard. You can reuse it in any fashion. If it's intricate, you may need to add an armature, which is a steel support, kind of like the skeleton of your body, and be able to just really a lot of the pieces that I'm working on when I'm doing it as a model, meaning I'm working in clay, but the end result is going to be a wood sculpture. I'm not looking for details. I don't spend a lot of time there. I'm looking for form. I'm looking for movement and shape. And that is a really fantastic way to just sort of discover what problems, because in your mind, like once you have enough experience using whatever tools you're using, you're making this and forming it with your hands, and you're starting to understand in your mind. You're going, what tool am I going to use in order to accomplish this cut or this cavity or this effect or this texture, whatever it is. And I think that there's an underlying value in doing this in clay, because most carvers, sculptors are very visual people. And I think the more senses that you can involve in the process of understanding the end result, the better. So you're seeing it, you're touching it, this tactileness of touching this clay and shaping and forming it solidifies these shapes in your mind, so that when you actually step up to your sculpture, whether it be a hand carving or a big chainsaw carving, and it allows you to kind of move through the piece with a lot more confidence, because you've kind of already worked it out. You've mapped it out. You understand what tools it's going to take in order to accomplish it. And so moving forward for me is one of the things that I'm trying to learn right now is mold making. And in that would allow me to basically make the mold of whatever piece I'm working on wherever I'm at. And the reason is because as good as clay is in terms of making a sculpture, is very delicate. And so as you can imagine, on a boat where you've got rough seas and you've got different conditions, the likelihood of you getting this finished sculpture back to a foundry where they can actually turn that piece into a finished bronze is maybe kind of small. And so my thought is to do these sculptures on board, of course, planning around weather, planning around, I may have to find a place on shore to do the final details, just to make sure that everything is not going to get bumped around and moved, and then be able to do those molds on the move as well. So once the molds are made, then I can ship those molds to any foundry in the world. And of course, once those molds are done, these pieces can be cast into numerous pieces. So I'll have more duplicity in a bronze sculpture than I would in a wood, where of course it's a one-off piece. The bronze adds that value of being able to be not only an extremely valuable piece in terms of it being bronze and being permanent, but also in the fact that it's duplicatable, and I can create, 20, 30, 40 pieces from one mold and without any problem. And because I believe working on, at least on the boat, the smaller scale pieces, those will be easily shipped. And, with YouTube being a worldwide audience, that hopefully will open up an opportunity for me to sell my work online via YouTube. Does that answer your question, Blake?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jeff. I know that that was something we were talking about, is finding other avenues for you to do your art and not necessarily just focus solely on chainsaw carving as being your only source of income.
Right.
This is your income at this point, and what you're doing is trying to find other avenues that you'll be able to support your family and continue to do your carving as well as your art. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really, I think everybody that starts a YouTube channel has a little bit different, maybe desire for the outcome based on, their channel and whatnot. And I think that, I don't know, I have like all these different stages of desires for the channel. But if it's successful, it definitely has a lot more potential than my current marketing method, which is basically word of mouth. And because I've been working here in the North Idaho area for the past 20 years, word of mouth has been that's pretty much been the backbone of my business for the past 15 years, 12 years. And so I'm super blessed to be able to just go from one project to the other without really having to just have a stockpile of art that has no buyer and take it to a show. Right now, I have to actually stop production of commission work in order to make inventory so I can even have a decent show. And even then, I don't feel like I do the greatest job in preparing for those, because they just don't, it's just hard. It's hard to stop. I don't know. It's kind of weird.
And before the meeting started, we were talking a little bit about carving bears and that being your happy place. What are the carvings that you enjoy the most? I know most everything is on a large scale. So what are those things that bring you the joy that you're looking for? Yeah,
I think probably I really, it's funny because bears are hands down one of the most carved animals out there, probably bears and eagles. Maybe it's because of the symbolism, maybe it's because of the perceived character, but people identify with them. And so I guess it's not a big surprise that I wouldn't myself as a carver identify with them. I really enjoy bringing the personality into the posture and the eyes. Probably if I get one comment the most about is like the face and the eyes are some of the things that attract people to my bears the most. And so I do spend a lot of time, and it's amazing if you really think about it. And when you look at some fine art painters and they're doing an impressionistic kind of feel, there's a lot of brush strokes and a lot of color and texture that goes into a piece, but then there's like a focal point to it that has a little bit more detail. And I think that's the same thing with my sculptures in terms of the bears and utilizing chainsaw art as an art form is picking out those elements that can be pure chainsaw, and then picking out those other elements that are like the pop, the thing. And I think that would be the face. So, in the lion's share, because of bears in the fact that they are widely interpreted, but also they're furry, and you can spend 90% of your time with a chainsaw in your hand accomplishing most of the work. But the most important part is the face and the way that you finish some of those last little details. And there's no pun to other carvers, but I do see a lot of times people will spend chainsaw carvers in particular get pretty proud about how fast they can get a sculpture done. And I just have not, I'm not a fast carver. And I just want it to finish well. I want those final details to be impactful. And so that's kind of where I've gravitated to. Use the chainsaw as much as I can to be efficient, but then zero in on those last minute details that really make it pop. In fact, I actually watched a video just recently. I'm trying to learn this camera, and they were talking about the autofocus settings of it and how important newer cameras have this eye detector, facial kind of detect with animals, where the camera uses algorithms in order to zero in on the eyes, making sure that the eyes are sharp, because the perception, even if the entire image is not sharp, if the eyes are sharp, the perception is the image is sharp. And I think that kind of, again, comes right back to the sculpture is if you've spent the time on the part of the sculpture that's the focal point, and that part is nailed, that the rest of the details are less important, not important, but less important.
So another thing that we talked about, Jeff, the other day was the fact that it's very important for you to be able to make art that lasts. We talked about, you're not wanting to put something outside and then for some reason it deteriorate, in a few years. And it's important for you to make sure that you're producing stuff that will be around for a while. Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe how you prepare your carvings and what you do to them to make sure that they do last?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a super good question. And sometimes when, as you get better and you're charging more for your work, the natural question is people will ask, well, if I'm going to invest in this, how long can I expect it to last? How can it be taken care of? That sort of stuff. There's a lot of variables. I've seen sculptures that have lasted, 20, 30, 40 years. And they're wood sculptures, but they're also protected. And the protection could be physical, meaning it has a roof or an overhang or something that really protects it from the elements. When you combine the elements, and when I say elements, I mean like basically water and sun. Those are primary, like rain and sun. Those things, like when a sculpture gets wet and then the sun shines on it, it takes those beads of water and they act like a magnifying glass to break down the finish. And so it's really important, I think, just in placement, if you're going to have an outdoor sculpture, to really think about what kind of exposure it's going to have. And in relation to that, know what kind of care it's going to need based on where you're putting it. because I have sculptures that are 10 or 15 years old, and they don't look that old at all because of the location that they were placed in, and they really don't have that much annual care. Then I have sculptures that just by happenstance, you'll have, a woodpecker go to town, and they'll, put a hole 3 inches in diameter into a sculpture. And those can be repaired. In fact, about every other year, not every year, but about every other year, I'm usually doing a retrofit on a sculpture. And in my particular case, with me having a truck that has a crane on it, it allows me to go and retrieve these sculptures and bring them back in the off season. And it's been a really good solution to the problem, because so many areas of the country are, they're inclement at some part of the year, which means that if you're going to do any sort of sculpture repair, that you're going to have to schedule it within this narrow slot, which happens to also be when most people are the busiest in terms of carving, the busiest in terms of doing art shows and that sort of thing. And so you're really trying to cram so much in such a short period of time. So my mainstay has been when somebody wants an outdoor sculpture, a lot of times from wood that is on somebody else's property. Mind you, like a tree dies or they have to take a tree out and they want to make a sculpture from it, is I'll go with my truck and I'll cut the stump free from the ground. And then I can treat the stump right at the ground level with a wrap preservative, preserving the base itself. And then I can bring the sculpture back to the studio. I can finish it properly and in controlled conditions, and then reinstall it. When I reinstall it, I put these little plastic spacers, basically just donut slices of electrical conduit, and those create an air gap between the base and the sculpture itself. And that creates moisture, or that prevents moisture from coming up into the sculpture. And it also, going back to this sort of retrofitting, when a sculpture needs more than just a coat of protection on site, I can come back and I can grab it with my crane really easily, bring it back to the studio, put it inside, and get it refitted. And in some cases, these are snowbirds, and they don't even know the sculpture's gone. They're just, they'll just do it off season while they're down in Arizona or Mexico or Palm Springs or wherever they go. And, we just reinstall it in the spring. Sometimes I'll store it here till the spring, or sometimes I just, goes right back where it originally came from. There's so many different products these days that you can use to protect sculptures outside, and some of them are better than others. I use one that doesn't have that much in terms of longevity, but one of the things that I really like about the product I use, which is it's called Flood, CWFUV, and it's the natural tone. It goes on looking like Pepto-Bismol, and then it dries relatively clear. But my favorite thing about it is that it works really well when you have multiple tones in your sculpture. So when I'm doing a sculpture, I have an animal, and then animal, let's just say, for instance, a raccoon. It's got grays and blacks and whites. And then it's got a tree structure, which is wood toned, and then maybe some rock structure, which is gray. So that's a lot of different variety of colors. And this one particular product actually allows for all those colors to coexist. Some of the really high protection outdoor wood products are designed for like log homes and siding and fences, and they have a lot of pigment in them. And if you have all those colors in your sculpture, and then you go and put this product that has all this pigment in it, it mutes all those colors down, and they can look really dingy and dirty and sometimes terrible. So anyway, the product that I use it's maybe not the best for longevity, but it's very easy for clients to put it on because they don't have to strip anything off. They can brush it on. They don't need any special equipment. It's water-based. It's easy for people to clean up with. So that's been my go-to for a number of years in our climate here. And again, you might live in a climate that has more humidity or more rain, that there might be a more appropriate product, but that's what I use here in Northern Idaho.
So there's another question in the chat there, Jeff.
Sure.
How many different chainsaws do you use on a typical carving? I know we had talked about that in one of the other videos that we'd done with you. Can you talk about your chainsaws, and then maybe the rack that you built there that's behind you, and why it's necessary for you to do some of your work there in your shop?
Yeah, so the space behind me you see is my carving bay. This is my studio burned down in 2019, so I rebuilt a new studio, and as a result, I was able to kind of build it to 15, 20 years worth of experience, and really you just make it very useful for my my workflow. This is going to be a little bit of a rough ride, but I'll try and do my best. So this area here is 30 feet deep and 12 feet wide. And I'll take you over here. So this is nothing special, but anyway, this is just like a post that I've cut slots into, so my chainsaws are not just sitting on the ground. This is my tool carriage, and the tool carriage is, sorry, this is really hard to do. There it is right there. So it's got an electrical cord, and it's on that barn door track, the black that you see on the ceiling. And the whole carriage can just slide along from one end of the lean-to to the other, which is really helpful because, sorry, I'm blocking the view, is really helpful because when you're sculpting, there's a lot of times you're going back and forth between your power tools and your chainsaws. So I can touch something up with the chainsaw, and I can push all those tools. And as you can see, all the cords, all the power tools have cubbies, and then of course there's magnet strips at the top that hold all my different bits. And I can come over here on the other side, and I've got also magnets on the walls with different calipers. And those calipers I can use to check measurements and proportions. I've also got a little measuring sticky tape here that I can take the calipers to and measure, and then transfer that. I've got sanders. I've got 4-inch angle grinders. This is a micro carver, which is really nice because you can just take the collet, twist it, and exchange your bits really, really quickly, as opposed to, say, a Dremel, which I do have. Sorry if I'm not lining in Dremels over here. I've got 2 Dremels, 3 die grinders. And I have 3 die grinders because I have bits that I like to use on a regular basis. And those favorite bits pretty much stay, on the tool. And then, yeah. So anyway, getting back to the chainsaws themselves, and the question was asked, how many chainsaws I use. I say typically 3. One is a larger blocking saw, and that's with a lot of horsepower and a lot of a blade length that's probably in the neighborhood of, I've got one that's 28 and one that's 32 if it's a big log. And then I taper down to a blocking saw, which is typically 18 to 20 inches in length, smaller, around, like an MS 250 is a one. And then you have your carving saws, and the carving saws are typically around anywhere from 28 to 36 cc's, and they have a blade. Some guys get down to an 8-inch blade, or even a 6-inch blade, all the way up to, well, I mean, they go larger, but I think the most common is the 12-inch carving bar. And but you could get away with like if you really wanted to just try it out, you could get like an MS 180, which is a relatively inexpensive saw made by Stihl. And you could get two different bars for it and use one saw. You have to go back and forth with swapping bars. But if you were really on a budget and wanted to try it, but you really, the difference that you have in having a carving bar and a standard chainsaw carving blade is enormous. The control that you get with a carving bar is significant. There are some things, some nuances. I don't know, Blake, if you want me to go into that much detail with the carving bar. Yes? No?
Yeah, that's fine. Go right ahead.
Okay. All right.
Sorry,
so a carving bar.
Delay here.
Yeah, a carving bar. The main difference with a carving bar, as opposed to a standard chainsaw bar, is that carving bars are a hardened tip, and they don't have a sprocket. And so whenever you see a chainsaw carver and, everybody knows, oh, your chain is too loose. So that's when the chain is just sagging beneath the bar. And that's actually, that's just par for the course for a carving bar. You run your chain pretty loose. You're going to see the drive links hanging down below. And one of the reasons why is because that chain is going around that bar, and it's a dime size tip. So it comes around at a very, very tight radius down here at the tip. And so the most important thing is bar oil delivery to that tip, because that tip can get overheated if you don't have enough oil going to it. And then, of course, heat makes the bar break down. It makes everything go bad pretty fast. So it's important, if you do take a chainsaw and convert it to a carving one, that it's best if you can afford one. They're a little bit more expensive, but if you can afford one that has an adjustable oiler, that's the best case scenario. And that way you can make sure that there's enough oil delivery to the tip. Yeah. So does that answer the question about?
Yeah, I think good. Jeff, actually, I want to ask you something we talked about the other day.
Sure.
You're talking about how you were transporting what you're carving in your sailboat. Kind of go through, if you don't mind, your whole little sailboat story and how you're be able to get wood that you're using around and all that. That'd be great for everybody to hear.
Sure. Yeah. It's a bit of a fluid process right now, because there's a lot that I'm still trying to figure out. On the last weekend, I took my tool set, a very limited tool set, based on my experience carving earlier on the shore. I'm saying, like, what do I really need? And so I made a toolkit that would fit in like a standard kind of tool bag that's probably 12 inches wide by about 30 inches, maybe not quite 30 inches. And I fit a mini. I got a little container of bar oil. I've got like a half-gallon fuel container. I took my chainsaw apart, and I was using an Echo blanket on the model. It's a very small chainsaw, not designed to remove a lot of wood. It's really more about tickling the surface. But if I did find a piece of driftwood or small diameter wood, it could be the singular saw that I might need for this kit. I've been talking to a couple manufacturers that are making those solar generators, trying to negotiate some deal with them in order to get a demo unit for me to give a try. That would make a big difference in me being able to have a power source that would be somewhat portable. The only other power source I have is a small generator, which is, I guess, like a knockoff version of the Honda, the portable generators. But that's a lot of weight and a lot of bulk. And also fuel. And so I've got solar panels on the boat, so I can recharge batteries and that kind of thing. So my workflow with the boat has been, like I said, it's a moving target. It's really trying to figure out what tools I absolutely need, what ones I could get away with. And some of that depends on what wood is available. So I have two options. I can either bring wood with me, or I can try to just sort of scavenge what wood I can find along the shoreline. And there is a lot of free flowing wood from spring storms and things like that are washed up on the beach. And those can be good options at times, but you have to be really careful about what you're going to choose, because sometimes they can have sand embedded into them, which, and of course, is not like the end of the world, but it does have an effect on the performance of your saw if it gets dull and there's just a lot of grit and grime in it. So on this particular trip I was talking about in October, I took a lot of tools. I took 3 chainsaws with me. I was really unsure of what I would need, so I kind of took more than what I needed. But the marina that I'm berthed in Bayview, there's like a seawall, and I can literally back my truck up to the edge of my parking space. I can use my crane and I can drop a log in the water, pull it over with a line to the back of the boat, and I just tow it to whatever location. And then in that case, I took the dinghy and I rode the log to shore, and I cut it up into manageable pieces that I could put over my shoulder. And I just sort of hiked up the hill to this little flat little terrace area where I could start doing some carving, and it's a lot of different tools that, like I took my it's called the work meat, and I took the work meat and it's one of those folding kind of clamp sort of tables. And so I put that in the dinghy, rode that ashore, had to haul that up the hill, and then just I use drills and drivers and timber screws for fastening wood to different, either a stump that might be existing there or something like that. So there's a lot of different things to consider. The boat is for 1 or 2 people, pretty roomy, and there is a fair amount of storage that is available on board to take tools. I think in a different situation, like a different region, it would be easier where I had like a more legit anchorage. But there's just probably only like 5 or 6 anchorages in the entire lake, and it's a big lake. There's a lot of open water, a lot of deep water, and like we had a windstorm 2 weeks ago that did a lot of damage to the marina, and it knocked down a tree just in front of the marina, and it sensed the marina's asked maybe about carving the tree. So that one will turn into a job probably. But it's when the wind blows there, you really need to know what you're doing, because mountain sailing is different than ocean sailing. Ocean sailing, the winds are much more consistent. When you get into these mountain lakes, you can have these bursts that come in, and it may blow 25, 30 knots for 5 minutes, for 10, for 15 minutes, and then it's gone. And then like you've got 5. It's so crazy. It's really difficult to learn to sail. I've had plenty of boating experience, but I'm a new sailor, and it's been challenging because I'm trying to learn all this in all at one time. Being a single-handed sailor and all that kind of stuff. So let's see, what else could I say about that?
Hey Jeff, there's a question in the chat, so sure. Maybe this will add to it. It said, how does your family feel about the time away from them when you go out on the boat to carve? And then how do you deal with that? And then I'll add on to that. We talked a little bit about your planning process and the fact that you've got a plan for everything because you're in a remote location and you never know what the weather's going to do. So can you talk a little bit about that whole process as well?
Sure. I'll start with the family situation. Obviously, family's been a big important part. That's essentially why I left being a boat captain, is because I had so many conversations with fellow boat captains that were just showing me pictures of their kids and not really having any part of their life or a relationship with them because they're pretty much gone all the time. So essentially, with the boat's only 15 minutes away from my studio, and our studio is based on our property where we live, or we have 10 acres. And so one of the things that I really feel like, well, first of all, my kids are growing up pretty quickly. I've got a 13-year-old, a 19-year-old, and a 21-year-old. My 21-year-old is married and moved out. My 19-year-old's got 1 foot out the door. And so it's my daughter's pretty much the last kid at home. And so I wanted to use this time where I am, I have access to Lake Ponderay, which is 15 minutes away. I can work out a lot of these little nuances with the boat, both, the sculpting element of it, the storytelling, the video making, all that kind of stuff I can do while I'm still here, and they can still be part of that. Once my kids are all gone, then those sort of longer trips will take place. And even at that, those will be like a quick jaunt here, maybe even leaving the boat, say in the Pacific Northwest or down into Mexico, and then coming back home. So I'm always kind of in and out of the studio. My wife's not a big sailor, but she likes to be on the boat. In fact, we're going out on the boat this weekend to spend some time together. And I kind of just keep those separate. She understands all that's necessary for me to make and film the sculpting element of the board, and so she doesn't really have any problem with me being away when I'm doing that kind of thing. And so it's been a pretty good balance in that regard. Your second question, remind me, Blake.
Yeah, I was talking about the fact that when you do go out, you're going into some remote locations.
The planning.
How do you plan for that kind of thing?
Yeah. So the planning part of it is something that I'm learning. So I have lists upon lists that I make, and I try to improve on those lists each time I go. With the boat being in the water, there's a lot that I could just sort of once the boat's set up and there, I know that those tools are there. And so I try to do my best to make sure that the tools stay like in place. So I know that, taking them back and forth is challenging because you can't remember whether you left it on the boat, whether you left it on the studio. So that part of it's really, really challenging for me. And, but as far as planning for different trips, depending on where they are and what I'm actually doing, those are the things that I really have to zero in on, because when I'm on the lake, I could be 5 hours away from being able to actually get to a place where I can, get resources. And even then, I'm back at the marina, and those are not really places that I could typically get a lot of these things. So we live in northern part of Idaho. And so even where my studio is at is, 20 miles away from town. And so being 20 miles away from town, there's times where even at my studio where I have everything, I'm still lacking. So it really takes a lot of forethought in if I'm going to make a piece of art. I really try to just look at everything surrounding it, what I'm going to need, tools, repairs, parts for those tools. So, with a chainsaw, I always take extra chains with me. I take bar oil, fuel, spark plugs, air filters, all the things that kind of surround the use of that tool with me. And then right now, I'm not really worried about doing a lot of the finished stuff in the field. That really, to me, is the sculpture is pretty well defined when it comes back here. And so I can utilize the power that I have here, the fixed, my tool carriage and everything else to finish out the sculptures. So it sort of accomplishes that goal of me being kind of, rested and restored from spending time on the water, but also kind of coming back to the studio and doing all that finish work.
So what upcoming projects do you have, Jeff? Do you have things lined up coming up?
Yeah, like as you mentioned, these totems behind me, these are more of a Native American style totem pole. And so they're going to be twin poles, and they're going to be flat on the outsides, and the sculpture is actually going to face inward. So as you drive through the center of this arched gate, you sort of experience the poles a little different. So the bottoms of those are concrete, and they're going to actually put stone wrapped around those. And then the totems, and then I haven't seen the design, but they have some sort of arch top, and I think it's an arched steel top. And this installation is going to be in Kalispell, Montana. And this is a customer of mine that's ordered 2 other pieces. So he's a really good customer, super cool guy. So that's a project. I just finished up some carved doors and the carved mantle. So those, I got a little hesitant to post them because the last time I did, they kind of blew up, and I had all this response for door carving. And as much as I like it, it's so different than in my normal workflow. In fact, I don't know if I told you, Blake and Dave, but I was I was in this position, but in all of those jobs where I was kind of like right here with my hands, carving at more or less eye level. So my shoulders were up, my hands were carving with these small intricate tools, and I was standing in one place. And it actually locked my back up. Like I do the chainsaw carving thing all the time, I have no problem. And this little lightweight scenario, my back got so jacked up, I ended up in bed for like 4 days. I couldn't walk, and it activated a part of my back that I don't use apparently, and just really aggravated those muscles. So it's really important for me to try to balance my workload. I was resting my arms, of course, and then I hurt my back. So what do you do? I don't know. Anyway,
on the back of those totems.
What's that?
On the back of those totems, you said you put some kind of
pinch yourself
chemical you're using to keep them moist, to try to keep them from splitting. Can you explain that?
Yeah. So this is a little bit of an experience, so I can't necessarily speak with confidence in the way this will work. And there's a product, and I may be mispronouncing it, but it's called Pentrasil. And it activates with the cellular level of the wood cells, and it surrounds those cells with, as best I can understand, is sort of this salt, if kind of thing, right? And so it sort of stabilizes the wood and prevents it from checking and cracking. So this wood was a living tree less than 3 weeks ago. And so it was fallen specifically for this. It doesn't happen very often. Most of the wood I use is already been harvested for whatever reason. But this particular one was taken down for this project. It's Western red cedar. And our Western red cedar, of course, most Western red cedar has a lot of taper and a lot of flare to it. So they typically come down and then they really flare out. And so it took me quite a bit of time to just get these all true, because they're sister poles and going to be designed to be symmetrical. I basically had to whittle these down round to the same diameter and then cut a flat spot. The flat spot will be the outer part of the pole where the knife plate will come down, and that's where it will anchor into the support structure, both top, and then there'll be a special adapter at the top to accommodate the arch. But in terms of the poles themselves, my plan, according to the directions of this product that I ordered, is to basically create a catch pan to catch any of the drips so I don't waste any of the material. And I'll use Pentrasil and brush it on. And so you brush it on and let it soak in. But it only works well with the high percentage of moisture. So I've got these poles wrapped up. They have sawdust, basically buried in wet sawdust, because I've removed the bark and a significant layer of the wood. Almost all of the sapwood is gone. And so the idea is that I will keep them wet and block it out, which removes as much of the moisture, as much as the wood as possible, so that this treatment is being applied to the blocked out figure. And so once that goes in and dries, that's supposed to stabilize the wood. Now, this is completely untested, and I just thought this would be has the budget to be able to buy us up as $88 a gallon. And so it's quite costly to apply, but in this situation, it will be money well spent if it works. And so you'll have to ask me like a year from now how well it worked, because I just don't know. But anyway, I'll also create in that flat area a relief cut, much like concrete. And so if it does want to have some pressure to remove as a point, I'll cut a knife, a saw blade width from top to bottom, all the way down to the pith. And that way, if there's any major movement that wants to happen, that I can actually make it happen where I want it to happen. And that's always no guarantee, because with wood, there's it's over the years, I've just learned to just accept whatever it is. The exception to that is if you have kiln dried wood or milled wood, where you have a lot more, you basically glue laminating wood together. And in that case, is very stable, very predictable.
Jeff, another question in the chat. How do you handle all the sawdust that you create in your work?
Yeah, I can show you. So all this sawdust gets swept down, hopefully to the other, or raked down. And I've got a hole in the back wall here with a grain sack. And this is all wood chips here. And you can see another bag right there. So all of that wood chips gets, I donate it to people who have animals. Sometimes it's harder to find people that want to have cedar, just because it's there has been known to cedar to cause some respiratory stuff. I think mainly with chickens, but I'm not 100% sure. Sorry. But yeah, that's pretty much how I do it. So people will come by the studio, and I'll use my crane and hook up those grain sacks and just drop it in. They bring the bags back and exchange them for full ones. And it's been pretty good. It's easy for me to deal with. It's a lot easier than trying to burn it. Sawdust doesn't burn very well. So that's one way.
Perfect. Well, we're coming up on about 10 after the hour. I'll go ahead and open it up to the people in the audience. If there's anybody else that has questions for Jeff, if you'll go ahead and ask at this time. Again, we want to remind everybody, it's called A Sculpted Life out on YouTube. If you haven't checked it out yet, make sure you go out and check out his YouTube page. He should be documenting a lot of the things that we've talked about today. So look forward to seeing that. Jeff, how many videos do you already have out there now? Do you know?
I don't know. I think 5. Yeah.
So they can go ahead and check those out now.
Yeah. It's a variety of content, but I mean, the gist of it is I want to film projects that I'm working on. And what I'm trying to learn and teach myself how to do is to be a better storyteller. So people see, rather than just like a, time lapse to music kind of presentation of work, that there's more storytelling. And some of that is honestly is even me getting more comfortable behind the camera and talking. There's a natural tendency for me in particular to want to just do my work and not really spend the time to film it. But the more that I do it, the more I feel the value in it. Because, I didn't have anybody around to teach me how to do anything. And not that this is by any means meant to be a how-to, but I think an intuitive person could certainly watch the videos and glean a lot of the things from it and be able to apply some of those techniques and some of those things to their own work, or at least, at the very least, an inspiration for people to use art to stay healthy. And I mean that mentally healthy, mostly, but physically healthy as well, because especially chainsaw carving is a very physical art form, and it does take a fair amount of strength and stamina to do a full day with the chainsaw in your hand on bigger sculptures.
Well, not only that, we talked about the fact that it's important to capture the stories and capture the history. And, that's one of the things that we set out to do with the International Association of Woodcarvers, is not only to have demonstrations, but also capture stories from people that may live on, through YouTube long after they're gone. But the fact that, it'll encourage other carvers. And so I think that's some of what you're trying to do as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because I think that, even with the storytelling aspect, there's an element of, it's a great marketing tool as well, because I think people, when they see a story being told, sometimes they don't even know what they want in its entirety. They just sort of like, how do I explain this? Sometimes clients will call me and say, yeah, I want a sculpture, but I don't even know what I want, which is weird to me, but they do a lot. And so I think that that's very interesting to think about if you're an artist and you're selling your work, because a lot of times it comes down to us as artists telling a story, telling about our work that inspires people to buy it. And so that's part of whether it's an integral part of what you do or not. I think that telling some sort of story, whether it's by pictures or video, is an important way for you to get work into the future. It inspires people to invest in your art and invest in you.
All right, Jeff, we're at 10 after. I'll go ahead and stop you now. I just want to say thank you for coming on again. You've been more than gracious to come on and share your work with us, share your story. And I look forward to seeing what you do with the YouTube videos. I definitely subscribe, and I look forward to seeing what you post out there. So I just want to say thank you for all that you do. And I know it's a lot of work to go out and do these carvings away from home, but you're wanting to capture that story. And so I look forward to that. I'll go ahead and call the auction. It looks as though the bid now is at $225. So if Aaron Stone will stay on with us, Aaron, we'll gather your information here in just a few minutes. Just want to say thank you all for joining us during the summer. We know everybody's busy, but we want to thank you for continuing to support us and continuing to come in when we have these meetings. Again, we'll meet again on the 15th of July with the Mad Carver. It's Randall Stoner. If you're not familiar with his work, you need to go out and check it out on Facebook. He does some amazing three-dimensional type carvings, and it should be a great meeting. He's been on with us a couple of times, and look forward to hearing from Randall then. And again, Rich Smithson will be on with us on August the 26th. So that's the upcoming meetings. Again, Jeff, thank you for coming on. We'll be talking to you soon. Thank you all for joining us with the International Association of Woodcarvers. where carvers are helping carvers. And we'll see you all again on July the 15th. Thank you very much.